right, class, let's get going with our next set of boards. Our topic, post-classical period, 600 to 1450 CE. Essential question, how did the feudal empires of Europe and the Far East arise? Muslim expansion into Europe. So the Muslims, as we spoke about at a board ago or two boards ago, the Muslim empire arose shortly thereafter, the 600s. It began to expand and expanded very rapidly. The Islamic empires had quickly spread over North Africa and into present-day Spain. Muslims began to spread into present-day France. And as the religion spread, Catholicism and Christianity obviously was being overwhelmed. Charles Martel defeats them at the Battle of Tours in 732. Tours is just a little bit south of Paris. The Carolingian dynasty, Charles Martel uses defeating the Muslims as a reason to unify all of the kingdom, and the kingdom being much of present-day Europe. His son Pepin is short. He's the successor to Charles Martel, and he comes about and talks about how their lineage should be recognized by the Pope. This brings about Pepin's son Charlemagne, and I should have underlined him. That's a pretty important person. Charlemagne is crowned by the Pope in 800, and actually on Christmas Day, 800, and the empire that he rules is now called the Holy Roman Empire. Most of Europe is once again under one rule, not since 400 years before this when the Romans controlled Europe. So Europe for about 400 years, thereabout, was just small kingdoms here and there, but once they were reunited under the Holy Roman Empire, then there was one, ruler once again. After Charlemagne's death, his grandsons divided up the kingdom, and they loosely became the countries that we know of today, like France, Germany, Italy. All right, Vikings. Now, the Vikings, the Magyars, began to raid Europe. Vikings were most successful, invaded into Russia, all of Europe, even going to North America at one point. In France, Vikings were known as Normans, and the most famous is William the Conqueror, who took England in 1066. And this is a very important date in history. I think there's actually a giant tapestry in England from that time that depicts that conquering time. Now, the Vikings, attacking everybody, builds up to feudalism. Feudalism is a political, economic, and social system with a strict hierarchy. You got the king, then nobles, then knights, peasants, and this is the strict hierarchy. This is how it had to be. Vassals were grants of land, so the king would have vast amounts of land. He would grant a vassal to a noble, and thus the noble would have to protect the king with the knights. This system was created so knights could protect the kingdom from the Vikings. So, when the Vikings came down and killing everybody, it created a need for this type of government. The states were created, that they were called fiefs or manors. Slowly, peasants worked their way over hundreds of years to evolve into the beginnings of a middle class, increase their trade, and increase their banking. Trade drives Europe. So we had feudalism where things were very small, everything took place on the manor. Oftentimes people never even went off of the manor or even left these fiefs because they were so poor or there was actually no reason to go anywhere else. Now, trade drives Europe. Towns began to hold the power, not just the manors. So as people began to move to middle class and more specialized, and they weren't just peasant farmers, they began to build in towns. The Hanseatic League in 1358, Northern Europe, it's a loose city-state structure to protect each other and their trade. And this took place in Northern Europe, and it was the beginning of the trade, especially in the Netherlands, that became very powerful in the future. Okay, religious pursuits. The Crusades. Many people know about the Crusades. They were Christians from Europe that tried to reclaim the Holy Land from the Muslims. So here's a bunch of guys, and they get all pumped up, all these Christians, because the Muslims are in the Holy Land. So they go down there to kill them to take the Holy Land back for the Christians. And they did this not once, twice. They did it many, many times. Catholic Church tries people for heresy against the church. And so this is kind of a dark time for the church. The Inquisition persecutes people for not following the church. So these things, like I said, was kind of a dark time for the church. They had the Spanish Inquisition, where if you were Jewish, or remember, there were many Muslims that had moved into Spain. If you were Muslim, they ran you out of there, or they killed you. The emergence of the nation states. So during this time, England, Spain, and France, especially these three, began to unify under one kingdom. So in England, you had the War of the Roses. The Tudor house began to arise. In France, King Henry IV with the House of Bourbon. And in Spain, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. All right, our last board here. Developments in Asia. So while all that was going on in Europe, in Asia, the dynasties rise and fall in China. So this is what's, the dynasties would come to a certain point. They had, remember, the mandates from heaven where they thought that they should rule because God told them to, and then there would be a collapse and a new one would arise. And the Tang dynasty greatly expanded and ruled over a very large area, and it was too large and then it collapsed. Then you had the Song dynasty. A lot of firsts during the Song dynasty. First time they put together a navy and withheld that navy, used compass, gunpowder, paper money, and you can see 960 CE to 1279 CE. That's quite a long ruling period for this dynasty. The Yuan dynasty was a little bit shorter. It was the Mongols who took over from Mongolia, Genghis Khan, and they took over China. They only ruled the Yuan dynasty for about 100 years. Takeover of Asia lasted until 1368. And then you had the Ming dynasty from 1368 to 1664. Beijing was the capital, the greatest era of orderly government and social stability. So there we talked a little bit about Europe, switched over to Asia. Our next set of boards will be almost all in Asia. So remember, history's no mystery. Take good notes.